We are fortunate to have three additional speakers in addition to myself. Libby Downey, who is in her ninth year as City Councilwoman. George Riley, who is a water activist, and I will be speaking. And then Keith Israel from the Monterey Regional Water Pollution Control Agency is the general manager. He will be updating us on the latest information on groundwater replenishment. We are indeed fortunate to have Libby. She just had hip surgery 2 weeks ago, and it's amazing she is here, and it shows her dedication. Today, I'm going to give a background information on how we got here, and Libby will be talking about groundwater replenishment, and George, who has been in San Francisco for the past 2 weeks, will give us the latest information on what is happening on the CalAm proposal and others. So I will begin to the early 1990s when the voters on the Monterey Peninsula, one, rejected the Los Padres Dam as a water supply option, and next rejected a small desal plant in Sand City as an option. In 1998, Assemblyman Keeley, then Assemblyman Keeley, introduced a bill which was signed by the governor, which required the California Public Utilities Commission to do a study on water supply alternatives for the Monterey Peninsula. And that alternative became known as Plan B. And under Plan B, there were several options described for a water supply alternative. And Plan B also recommended that the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District be the lead agency in developing a water supply alternative. That process was more or less turned on its head. CalAm did apply for a water supply alternative, and three options were looked at that point. But during that process, the CPUC decided that it would be the lead agency for making decisions on water supply options for the Monterey Peninsula. And it also was the agency preparing the environmental impact report. It may not surprise you that the CPUC had never undertaken an EIR on a water project before, and its foray into water management was a new endeavor. Out of the three proposals that came forward, the regional project, which went down the tubes a few years ago, was the project selected by the CPUC to move forward, and that was an effort of CalAm, Marina Coast Water District, and the county to move forward with a large desal plant in the marina area. Because of litigation and conflict of interest issues, CalAm ultimately withdrew its support for that particular project. And subsequent to that, we now have a proposal from CalAm. There are approximately 4 various desal proposals being discussed in the public arena at this point. They would all more or less supplement 2 other major water projects. One's called Aquifer Storage and Recovery. That's where water is taken during high flows from the Carmel River and sent into the seaside aquifer, and that is already in operation. And under the current proposals, that project would be expanded. Another aspect of the project is groundwater replenishment, which you'll hear more of later. So there are 4 proposals for desal that would all supplement those other 2 sources of water. And I forgot to mention that there are 3 small projects that the city of Pacific Grove is currently pursuing, which would provide a little over 100 acre-feet of water for landscaping purposes. The first project is the Cal-Am proposal, which would take water from the Salinas Valley groundwater basin out of the shallow aquifer and use that as the water to desalinate. The proposal is for a project either 9,000 something acre-feet per year or about 5,000 acre-feet per year, depending on whether or not groundwater replenishment gets off the ground soon enough. As you will recall, some of the issues related to the Cal-Am project, the previous effort to take water out of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, was the lack of water rights. And also there is a prohibition against exporting water out of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. Those issues still persist today. Cal-Am recently increased the capacity that it is looking at by about 1,800 acre-feet a year. And 1,300 of that would be for lots of record, and 500 acre-feet would be for what's called a tourism bounce back, which would address increased tourism anticipated when we have enough water available. The key factor here is that there, at this point, no specific plans to restrict that water to lots of record and tourism bounce back. And if there are no restrictions, that's enough water to satisfy 6,400 residential units if you assume 0.25 acre-feet per dwelling unit. So people will be looking at whether or not the water for that use will be restricted to those uses. The mayor's commissioned a study to look at that project plus 2 others, which I will discuss. And in a cost comparison, the Cal-Am project was the most costly of the projects evaluated on an equal term for each one. The mayor's group has conditionally supported the Cal-Am project, and its support is contingent upon a number of factors, including related to governance and public financing and permit processing. So that is the Cal-Am project. Then there is what's called deepwater desal. That is a project that would be in the North Marina area next to Moss Landing, and it would take water from about 100 feet depth, and it is thought that the entrainment issues for that project would be less harmful because of the depth of the water intake. The deepwater desal project has done 2 years' worth of studies as it relates to the entrainment issue, and is currently has an application before the State Lands Commission, and an EIR is being conducted on that project. The other project is the People's Desal project. That would be on property adjacent to Moss Landing. It again would be direct ocean intake. The project has infrastructure, both intake and outfalls, at the facility as a result of previous owners of that site. And the People's Project has adequate funding to carry the project forward, and this differs from the Deepwater Desal project. Finally, there is the fourth project, which is from the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. The district has decided to move forward in the event that the CalAm project fails or falters, and some of the reasons of concern is the threat of litigation from particularly the ag industry in the Salinas Valley over water rights issues and harm to agricultural interests. Plus, there are other technical issues related to the technology that would be used for extracting the water through slant wells. This is technology that isn't widely used. So that's an overview of where we are today, and there'll be plenty of time to respond to questions afterwards. But I'm going to next turn this over to Libby, who's going to talk about groundwater replenishment. But before I do that, I have the following note. The League, along with several other organizations, developed what is called the Hybrid Regional Plan back during the 2007-2008 timeframe. And in that plan, the groundwater replenishment, aquifer storage and recovery, and a small desal plant were recommended. We didn't get very far with that effort. In fact, sustained a lot of ridicule. And it was interesting that when CalAm proposed its new proposal, it pretty much mirrored many of the recommendations that were in the hybrid regional plan. As it relates to groundwater replenishment, there was active opposition to groundwater replenishment during the 2007-2009 period by some of our leading politicians. And that was very unfortunate because now it's a project that has wide community support. And had groundwater replenishment been able to go ahead when it was initially proposed back in 2007 timeframe, we would be a lot further along in terms of addressing and meeting some of our water supply problems. So that is a commentary on some of the struggles that have gone on as it relates to all the water issues on the peninsula. So now I am delighted to turn this discussion over to Libby Downey.
Thank you, Janet. I think I'm sitting beside a new commissioner for the status of women, and I'm so proud of her. Thank you for allowing me to be here. The last 2 weeks I haven't been to a water meeting, which is completely different in my life. So that's one of the reasons I asked my general manager, Keith Israel, to come and give you some of the current aspects. But I know I'm not talking to an uneducated group. I'm talking to a very sophisticated group of people who keep up with things, who know what's going on. And so please, I don't want to insult you, but look at this flyer that I've put on your table just for a quick refreshment of your memory. That everybody see this? It's called Groundwater Replenishment Project. And this is 101 groundwater replenishment. If you look to the left box, the water comes from all sources, will come to us. Microfiltration is the first thing that happens, and that passes through a filter at very low pressure, and it removes particles and bacteria. Then it goes to the next process, which is reverse osmosis, and that's the one you hear about so much when we're talking about groundwater replenishment. because that's the key. It's a very, very strong pressure, and it removes viruses, pharmaceuticals, and salts. And I know you've heard that discussion when still many people are flushing pills down the toilet, which we wish they wouldn't do, but we got to take care of that anyway. The next process is ultraviolet light and hydrogen peroxide, and that breaks down any compounds that are left. So then we go to the purified water. It's put into the aquifer, mixes with other groundwater, and then after an extended period of time is pumped out. So just a quick refresher that we mean business when we're trying to purify water, and it's not like the first thing that happens when you're working on this is you get rid of the solids from the liquids. I know that would please anybody who has a yuck factor in their mind, and that comes along just very easily. But then you can see from this what we do. As a former public health nurse, boy, the public health department's not going to let you drink anything that you shouldn't be drinking, so we have lots of regulations, but I just wanted to refresh your memory on that. And then I want to talk a little bit about de facto water use. How many people have been to Disneyland since the middle 70s? Okay, folks, you've all been a participant for wastewater that you were drinking. That was happening then. What we don't realize is that it's happening all over and we're just not quite aware of it. If you will look at this map that I have on your table, it's a map of Dallas, Fort Worth. They get their water from the Trinity River. They're really upstream. So what they do is they take water out of the Trinity River. They end up putting back into the Trinity River the leftovers, so that trickles all the way down to Lake Livingston. And Lake Livingston is where Houston gets their water. So they take water out of the lake, which is some of it which is wastewater, and treat it, and that's what Houston uses. Now, I don't think Bush would like to live in Houston if he wasn't getting good water to drink. So what I'm trying to prove is that it happens and you're not even aware of it a lot of the time. It just de facto happens. This next little brochure I have for you just points that out more vividly. If you look in the very center, this is the potable water reuse. You'll see City 1. Okay, follow me with the arrows. The City 1 takes all of their sewer and takes it to the wastewater treatment plant. Now, some of it they use for potable, non-potable, like irrigation, like farming, agriculture, industrial uses. But then some of it they work really hard and do what I've talked about with our recharge and send it to the recharge basin so that they can recharge their water that has been treated, and then whoops, it goes right back to the city. Some of it they don't do that much effort with, just like our water that we use for Casterville when we are irrigating the farms. We treat it tertiary, but not all the process that we do for groundwater replenishment, and that goes in the river. Downstream the river, look what, we have another city, and that city takes water from that river, which has wastewater in it, takes it to the treatment plant, takes care of it, and it goes through the whole process, and then the city uses it. So what I'm trying to point out is that we already have this as a process, and it's happening all over. When I was in a conference in Washington, D.C., I went to Fairfax County, which is a plant that has been doing this for years, as well as the Orange County plant that's been doing it for years, as well as Singapore, some parts of Australia. So it's out there. So when you hear people that are afraid of this and have a yuck factor, I would ask you to help educate them. That's what we need to do, is to educate people. So we get comments in the paper about nobody's going to want to come to the peninsula and and drink this terrible water, our tourism will, go to hell in a handbag. I think we have to really work on this and try to. So I'm asking for your help to educate people. Now I have two other points I want to bring out before I turn this over to Keith. I know you've heard of the 19,005, which is what the farmers say is their water. I want to explain that in 92 there was a document that was signed by the pollution agency and the county when we were doing the CSIP and turning our effluent, all of the peninsula effluent, we gave it to the farmers because the Bureau of Reclamation wouldn't have given them a loan, which was a zero interest loan, without it. So we wanted to help out the farming community. So our effluent went, and they have been using not as much as they anticipated. I think they've been using, 14,000 acre feet, Keith? And they had thought they would use a lot more. So they estimated, and they estimated incorrectly. In this estimation, they also did a chart. And in this chart, they said, we predict down the road we will have enough for 19,500 acre feet for the farmers anytime we want it, because we predict we're going to be making 30,000 acre feet of water. Well, that didn't happen. And then after the 92 document, there was a document called the Third Amendment. And in the Third Amendment, this extra water was addressed. So that therefore, the Third Amendment said, you know what? The water that you don't use, PCA can use 3,500 of it, which is, we have been dumping into the ocean ever since this CSIP started, all of this unused water, and that's what we want to use to get this groundwater replenishment. That's the farmer issue and the concern. The farmers are going on the 19,500 as a fact when it was a prediction, it was a goal, it was not a fact. It kind of reminds me of going to your stockbroker and saying, I'll give you 10,000 if you can give me a 12% return on this. And 3 years later you go back and it was an 8% turn, but you promised me 12%. Well, I did the best I could, but 8 is 8, and that's what you get. So I'm trying to help people understand, because the 19.5 you will hear over and over and over again. And basically, that's negating the last document that was made between the county and PCA. Having said that, now I want to turn this over to Keith, who is not only the general manager for us at MRWPCA, but he's also on the TAC committee for the mayors, so advising the mayors. And he is our #1 man for knowing groundwater replenishment up one side and down the other. Okay, Keith, thank you.
A couple of things that we work very closely with CalAm. They have some very good people, and we've been working with the CPUC. But from what I see, I think it's important to make sure we have as much as we can in local solutions. And let me offer you one example of that. As a regional wastewater entity, our base rate is about $13.50 per month, plus the local charge for our sewer service. I used to live at Las Palmas Ranch. The rates out there, when I first went out there and when it opened up in 1990, were about $30 a month. The county operated it. Eventually, they got up to be about $55 a month, and they sold out to CalAm. And now the rates are $120 a month. You look at Toro Park. It's operated by another utility regulated by the CPUC, and their rates are also about $120 a month. And it's basically the same service. And it's not that these are not good organizations. To me, is the further you get away from locally owned, you add the bureaucracy and all the inefficiencies there, and I think we all pay for that. So that's why one of the other reasons why, certainly we need desal, and I think CalAm's going to do a good job, but having projects like groundwater replenishment and aquifer storage and recovery to finish up the project are very good. And also, as Janet has mentioned, we didn't make it the first time through. There was a lot of politicking going on, some of the reasons why we didn't make it. But sometimes it's good not to be the first selected, because that project went down in flames, and it might have had some impact on our project. So we're ready to go now. And again, it's not the first off the finish line. It's the agency that gets things done and crosses. And we've done that. For ag, Ed knows about our ag project. We've produced over 55 billion gallons of water for agriculture. A lot of that water came from the peninsula, came from Salinas, but we certainly helped them out on helping to solve seawater intrusion. It's been very successful. So we've been able to build things. So I've got this one handout here. I know we're short of time, but a little bit of background about the agency, the project. One of the things MRWPCA believes very strongly is that our wastewater is a water resource, and we ought to use it all. And actually, if you look at some of the information, I've got some links on here. On the water reuse website, there's a little video called Downstream. And we're all downstream. And basically, all of our water, the molecule is the same, H2O. But basically, it gets some impurities come along with it. Well, you can take those impurities back out. So I think we need to think about all of our water and reusing it again and again. Libby has done a great job of talking about the process. It's very good. One of the key things is we have almost 8,000 acre feet of wastewater going out to the ocean, which no one's using. And the ag can't use it because it's in the wintertime. It's expensive to store water, so that's a good resource. But we've also looked in our discussions with the growers. They have some plans. They want to expand. And we said, well, rather than to worry about fighting about how to take a pie and split it up, fight over how many pieces each of us get and what the size of those are, we said, why don't we bake some more pies? So we've looked around. The city of Salinas has some ag washwater ponds. And basically, they're almost full. And they're going to need to expand those. They'll need to spend money for that. So we said, well, that's really pretty good water. Why don't we take some of that water and help solve a problem for the city, save them some money, but also that could be a water resource. Stormwater. We always think about, we have water utilities, wastewater utilities, we have stormwater utilities, and really it's all talking about water. So we're looking now, whereas we considered stormwater to be a nuisance, we didn't want in our sewer system. I'm going to show you in a minute here, our flows are going down. Why don't we capture that stormwater? That could be another source. It's easy to clean up, and we can add it in. The agricultural folks have some drain water. And again, it's a little bit saltier, but again, it's fairly decent quality. It can be cleaned up. Let's consider using that. And then we have, as I said, all the unused wastewater. Libby had talked about the water rights situation. And again, what we're doing is trying, rather than go to court and argue agreements with attorneys and not get anything done, let's go ahead and see if we can identify additional sources so the growers have as much water as they need, and we also have as much water as we need for the peninsula. There's plenty of water out there. So that's the approach we're taking. The key thing that's happened, there's been such an emphasis on conservation. Everyone has done a good job. The amount of water we're using, and particularly the wastewater, has been declining the last few years. And I've got a chart showing the amount that has declined. In large part, we talk about price elasticity of demand. And basically what that means is what happens when you raise the price of water? Do people use the same amount and just pay more money, or do people conserve? Well, when CalAm implemented their tiered rate structure about 2 years ago, all of a sudden people found out that if they used very much more water than the base, the lower tiers, their water bill went way up. And consequently, what we found is there's been a big decline in the amount of wastewater generated. We think it's tied to that rate increase. So we think there's a very strong link between the price of water and the amount of water used, and certainly the wastewater. Of also a concern, if we're going to reuse the water, we have to be concerned about all the chemicals. If we use less, that means what's in the water becomes more concentrated. I have a graph here on sodium. Basically, over the last few years, it's been going up because of all the good conservation. So as we go through here, we've got a project that can get done. Technically, it's been done by Orange County for over 40 years. The most recent project went online in 2008, a much larger expanded facility. So we don't really have any technical issues. We can work out things with the growers, which I think we can. We'll be able to get the project done by the end of 2016, so we may have enough water to get us by for a while, or at least talk to the state board to avoid some type of rationing or moratorium. Again, our water, we have the ability to make sure it's absolutely safe, and we got a track record working with our ag folks of reuse of our wastewater on food crops. We can do a project that's cost effective. Again, these are realistic numbers. When we say $2,600 an acre foot, Orange County has done theirs for a little less than $1,000. So we think these are realistic numbers that can be implemented here. Again, by bringing in multiple sources of water, we'll be drought proof, and we'll have something that we can use for some time. And one of the key issues, why would you want to reuse your wastewater instead of maybe getting brand new desal water? Well, again, some other reasons you might think about. Well, the water that goes into the desal plant, it's probably going to have a little bit of wastewater in it too, because it's going to be coming from either the ocean or the groundwater. But it can use the same process. But the big problem is it takes a lot of energy to produce that water. You're starting with salt that's maybe close to 30,000 parts per million, whereas our wastewater, we're talking a salt level that's really only about 1,000 parts per million, a little less than that. So the amount of energy is about a fifth the amount. So if you've got two different sources, why not use the one that uses the least amount of energy? Plus, we think we can be online by the end of 2016, which Cal-Am is doing all that they can, but they have a lot of difficult permits to work out. They've got a lot of water rights issues to work out. So again, that's the approach that the mayors have recommended. There needs to be a portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Basically, about 3 weeks ago, the Water Reuse Association had their California meeting right here in Monterey. And Lester Snow, some of you may be familiar with the name of former executive director of the State Water Resource Control Board, basically came down and did a presentation. He's now working for the California Water Foundation. And basically, he proposed a sustainable management approach. We're talking about groundwater management, and again, our groundwater replenishment water, we're talking about putting that in the seaside basin to better use that basin. Urban water use efficiency, and again, we support reductions where possible with new technology, and it's out there. We're going to have more conservation coming on as people transition to high efficiency dishwashers and clothes washers. Agricultural water use efficiency. Again, we've got a lot of experience of that working with the folks in the Salinas Valley. Stormwater capture, recycle water, and we're not involved in 6 and 7 reservoir reoperation or flood management, but we can meet most of those objectives in an integrated approach. I've listed several resources for further information. Don't believe me. If you want to, go out on the internet and see what's out there. There is some misinformation on occasionally you'll find, and we've seen some of that here locally, but we'll be more than glad to provide our resources and information against anything they can provide. Again, a lot of projects around the country and around the world are listed on here. Scottsdale, for example, it's an area they take some of they're using the same process that we're talking about doing. El Paso, Singapore, Australia. And then more recently, there's a booklet, and I didn't bring enough with me I didn't have enough, but they're over here if you'd like them, and I can probably get some more. Little purple book, and it talks about understanding water reuse. And it's put together by a list of the organizations that help support this, and actually we also, one of many wastewater agencies, also supported the publication of it. It tells you a lot about what Libby has talked about the reuse of wastewater and the safety involved in that, and answers, I think, most of the questions you might have. So if you'd like more information, go to some of these resources. Karen Harris in the back of the room, we do a tour, I believe, once a month. you can go to our website and sign up for that tour. Or if you have other questions, my phone number is listed on here. You can give me a call or give Karen a call. I'll be glad to answer any questions. And also, we need to get the word out. And if you have organizations that are looking for a speaker, as long as it's not too early in the morning, but I'd be glad to come. But if it is real early in the morning, Karen will be there. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any question you might have at the appropriate time.
Just a note, the $2,700 per acre foot for groundwater replenishment compares to at least $5,000 per acre foot for desalinated water, and a lot of that difference relates to energy costs. Here is our last speaker, who is just back from San Francisco and can give us the latest news.
Well, it's not over in San Francisco yet. There's another hearing tomorrow. In fact, it's going on today too. But also later this month, they're going to have a couple more days of evidentiary hearings. There's a new yuck factor in my vocabulary anyway. It's the PUC process. And what's unfortunate about it is that it's an adversarial process where you establish your terrain, you establish your turf, you establish your position, you argue forever for your position. And then somebody else argues for their position. Well, all that does is harden everybody into their own logic and then their own conclusions, and it doesn't facilitate any compromise. So the compromise is not a process. It's Solomon. You know, it's all presented to the judge. The judge is going to make a certain decision, and it's all based on your view versus somebody else's view as opposed to some kind of collective effort. So that's the problem with the PUC process, I think. I want to talk about a couple of what I call crunch points, and it's largely based on what I just learned in the past couple of weeks. One is the schedule. The schedule that the PUC is following is a rapid schedule for CalAm's purpose. CalAm has requested a rapid schedule. Everybody falls into that schedule because the dictator is the PUC. But the reason it's important is that it's on a fast track, and that's in contradiction to what the ALJ has recently said, which is we want a full record of all the issues related to the various proponents. So he on the one hand has a tight fist over the schedule, which is a very accelerated schedule, and he wants a full record. What's come out recently is in the past couple of days is that he's allowing all kinds of evidence being included, including poetry, by the way. But he's allowing all of this, and it takes time to explain why it's being offered and so on. Now, it hasn't been decided that all of this is going to be included as part of the record, but they're submitted as part of the record. But in order to allow various forms of evidence and to allow a full record, he's got to hear from everybody, including me. And so we take time. And that is dragging out. They can't stick. They haven't been able to stick to their schedule for the evidentiary hearings. In fact, they thought they were going to be done tomorrow. They're not. They've got more scheduled in later April. And so the first, I call it a crunch point because I think the first break in this tight schedule. A tight schedule, by the way, favors CalAm, and it puts pressure on everybody else to comply. But the reason I think the first break in that has occurred because of a lot of arguments around climate change and a lot of arguments around the schedule that leads to a proposed decision before all the data is in. So the current schedule calls for a proposed decision when the EIR has barely hit the street. So there's not going to be enough time to evaluate what's in the EIR in order for the PUC to get all the information everybody thinks it needs before it makes a decision. And by law, they're supposed to get all the information. Second, the test wells are not scheduled to produce any useful data until a year from now. They won't even start collecting the data until sometime early next year. And maybe 6 months of data will be useful. But the point is, I think the ALJ is beginning to feel a little concerned that his schedule is going to push a decision point before a lot of the data is in, which only sets up the opportunity for litigation. So I think he's aware of that. He did indicate a couple of days ago when somebody was talking about the schedule of certain events, he said, why do you say that? And they said, because it's in the schedule. And he said, who says the schedule might not change? And that's the first indication he's given that he may change the schedule. I think he's going to change it, which only means CalAm is going to be farther behind than they are. They're already a year behind. By comparison, the groundwater recharge project, assuming they don't have problems, but anticipating on the same understanding of what the hurdles are, it looks like groundwater recharge can meet the schedule. The deadline is January 2017. And if any project that can produce a substantial amount of water that can come online by then, will give all sorts of reasons to argue that the state should give some relief on the deadline. Because the deadline imposes sanctions. If you don't have enough water, and groundwater recharge is only adding maybe 35% or so to what the need is, maybe 40%. But any substantial amount of water will give an argument to the state on why they should back off their schedule. So the schedule, I say, is the number one crunch point. But the number two, the reason the schedule is because of lack of data, the lack of information. There's been a lot of testimony about why can't we question the EIR process. PUC is going on two tracks. There's actually a third track, but the PUC track has two tracks. One is everything related to desal and everything related to CalAM jurisdiction, everything related to CalAM's proposal, specifically around desal, is on one track. The separate and second track is the EIR track. So all the environmental issues are going on one track, all the costs and viability and data and issues on the second track. Well, the two aren't talking to each other, and they don't come together until sometime down the road, which is later this year. But the fact that there's lack of data leads to what I think is the crunch point that's fundamental to the entire process at the PUC, and that is the water rights issue. As long as CalAM is in the Salinas Basin, and as long as they are pursuing water that appears to have some component of groundwater, then the ag interests are concerned. The ag interests give every indication that they will fight for their rights. Now, whether they're right or wrong, I have some arguments about whether I think they're right or not. Nevertheless, they think they're right, and therefore they're going to, I think, pursue litigation, or at least they'll threaten it enough to be an effective negotiating point. But the reason that the data becomes critical is that the ALJ wants a full record. If you don't have the data, then you don't get a full record. Where there's lack of data, it's a source of potential litigation. So to the extent that the ALJ wants the information, he's got himself caught in a bind between those that are demanding more information and those that feel they have enough. CalAM feels it has enough. Those that feel like there's not enough data are those that are arguing water rights issues. And CalAM is also comfortable, a little too comfortable, I think. I mean, when you walk around, you see, who talks to who, and who are the cock of the walks and who are those that are kind of in the barnyard, And there's a real difference. I mean, you can see it. It's just, it's a funny thing for me to notice. I know I'm walking around the barnyard, So I look up to all these big cock of the walk people. But nevertheless, there's a comfort level that's a little disturbing, but not so much because it's their world. The PUC is the CalAM's world. So they're comfortable with the process, they're comfortable with... I've been saying for several months now that I think their attorneys are better than their engineers. But the engineers can get them into trouble, but their attorneys can get them out of trouble. Just give them time and give them enough money. Well, we give them both. So the bill's on us. But still, let me just kind of wrap up a couple of things here. I think some dominant themes are being presented, and I think they're going to play out. But I don't know if you can predict the conclusion. But I think these are the issues that are going to play through toward the conclusion. CalAM has said several times, and this will be contested tomorrow, by the way. CalAM has said for some time that they're interested in water. There are several aquifers just off the, well, there are several aquifers. The one they want is an upper aquifer. It's called the Dunes Aquifer that our farmers aren't interested in. It's a small, shallow, and largely not very productive for ag. And there's a second aquifer at the 180, and then there's another one at 400. There's another one at 900 feet. But the argument is around the Dunes Aquifer, which the farmers aren't interested in, and the 180-foot aquifer, which is the farmers are interested in, very interested in. That's their main water supply. That's also the one that's been intruded with seawater, but they're trying to rescue that water back. They're trying to do things to prevent seawater intrusion. But it's their aquifer. The farmers call it their aquifer. But CalAm has said we will drill a slant well that will go through the Dunes Aquifer. If we can get enough information there and enough water, basically, they say if we can get enough water from the Dunes Aquifer, that's where we'll get our water supply for the desal. But we will continue to drill until we get to the 180 aquifer, which is the farmer's aquifer. But they say if we don't get enough water in the Dunes Aquifer, we will get the 180 water. So they're saying, as much as they're saying that we have two ways to get water, if one doesn't supply us enough water, we will go to the 180 and get our water. The 180 water is a courtroom battle. The upper aquifer is a data battle. What does the data say? Most of several of the people who are testifying think there's got to be a lot more information available around that water source before you commit to it. So there's a lack of data and adequate data, the question of adequate or inadequate. That's the argument that's going on now, and however the CalAm views it or the PUC views it will play out somehow, but more data is better because we're making a major commitment. It's a huge, it's the largest public works project, local public works project ever in this county. And so it's a lot of money, and it has a huge impact. But beyond the lack of data, let me just go to a couple other points, and then we'll go to Q&A. Climate change is starting to get more traction in the consideration of what's going on. And this is where the poetry comes in. I mean, they're trying to argue this point every way they can. And the fact that there's no good answer to being on the coastline and having more severe winter storms in our future, that's just a huge problem waiting to be dealt with, or one way or another. And I think it's the climate change argument that's largely driving lack of data about it, but also how do you prepare for it if you can kind of see it coming, where you locate your intake. So let me just back up briefly. The intake problem is between open ocean and subsurface. Subsurface means you're below the sands. It's already partly filtered. There's less marine life in those sandy areas. If you get down far enough, there's hardly any marine life at all. And that's the preferred place to get your water out of the ocean. Open ocean intake is still, has been used in the past, continues to be used widespread. The Middle East, Australia, Singapore, other places that have water problems, they often just take it out of the water, the ocean, open ocean. There's a pretty strong political group that's arguing for subsurface come hell or high water. We want subsurface, we don't want open ocean. There's another group that's saying, look, if it's going to cost us an arm and a leg to get subsurface, then open ocean is less expensive, we ought to be able to do that. And they say, no, we'll fight you forever on it. So not only do we have a legal argument pending over water rights litigation in general over the aquifer they may or may not be in, you've got another issue, no, it's not a legal issue, it's more of a political issue. Will open ocean intake be an option? And that's going to have to play out too. But they're pretty strong proponents on both sides of those. Public financing, it looks like CalAm might be open to some public financing. There are going to be some limits. The community consensus, by the way, has gotten some traction, largely because the mayor's group has been presented as the representation of the community consensus. So if you believe that Mayor Burnett and Chuck De La Sala and a few of the mayors truly represent the community consensus, that's an opinion you have. But up there, they're calling that a representation of community consensus. So even though some of us and other groups are saying, not necessarily, because there are other points of view they don't represent, it's kind of getting traction on those. One key issue I think that will come up is the Water Management District's backup plan. They're looking at a potential project that would be located in Moss Landing. It would probably be open ocean. It may not. It doesn't have to be. It may be a deep water version. It may be a People's Project version. We don't know. The analysis is still being undertaken. But Fred Keeley, who has a pretty strong presence, he testified the other day, yesterday, and he made two very strong points that I thought were good for local interests. One was that he totally endorsed the groundwater recharge project and the portfolio approach. If you don't maximize your use of all your water resources, then we would be stupid, and the PUC would be even more stupid to to use desal water, the most expensive water there is, to be the answer to everything. So he made a very eloquent argument that we need to use all our resources, and cost is a factor, and the PUC needs to acknowledge that, which really means it's going to go forward. You know, groundwater recharge is going to go forward. I totally support that. The other thing he said was that the community consensus is represented by a collection of elected officials, which is the mayor's group, right? The mayor's group is getting traction at the PUC level. I just want to pass that along. I think they're doing a good job. I think Cal-Am is very confident in the job they're doing. I think the lack of data is going to be an important issue going forward, and I think the schedule is going to give a little bit, which means Cal-Am will be more delayed. I could say more, but I need to stop.
All right, questions. Brenda, you had a question?
It just seems like you're missing a representative here.
The question is there another agency doing groundwater replenishment?
Yeah, let me certainly expand on that. Certainly we're in partnership with the Water Management District to do this project. And matter of fact, a great partnership is one where the partner has some money to help out. So this last year they went through an assessment process, and they have got some funds, and we're in the process of trying to obtain those funds to help fund our project. So they've done a great job and a great partner, and I don't want to certainly offend the Water Management District, because that's the kind of thing we really need, all the agencies working together, and it's these joint solutions that work the best.
Lori.
Cal-Am recently purchased the Garrapatta Water Company in Big Sur. And I just wonder, have you any idea what their Garrapatta water is, Garrapatta Stream has a local water service there?
I didn't know that, but it's consistent with their national strategy. In their objectives, you go to their website, you dig deep enough, it's American Waterworks website, you dig deep enough, you can find the reference called tuck-ins. They have a strategy to increase the customer base by buying up small utilities, water and sewer. And they've done that with some of the outlying municipal firms or municipal water companies and public providers out the Highway 68. They've done that over the past 10, 15 years. But that is part of their strategy. It doesn't surprise me. I hadn't heard that before, and I'm sorry they're doing that. But you know, small water companies need something bigger and more predictable for managing their water systems, and I can understand the problems of the small.
Sylvia.
I would like some clarification. In the case of the groundwater replenishment, are you dependent on any approvals? You are doing it right now. It's just an increased capacity.
We're working on the project. We haven't, all we've done is recycle water for ag. And I think we hope to be somewhat independent. We're not part of the CPUC process, except that the CPUC has to allow Cal-Am to buy some water from us. And actually, they wouldn't buy it from us. They would, again, in our partnership with the Water Management District, we would basically sell our water most likely to the Water Management District, and then they would negotiate directly with Cal-Am. So again, things are moving along, but we are somewhat separate. And if somehow the desal portion that Cal-Am or whoever is selected is delayed, we would recommend and think there's a good chance we could move forward and be done independently. And again, that's part of the portfolio approach. And quite honestly, with the reduced consumption of water because of the higher rates, are you going to be using more water when the rates double? Or are you going to be using less? I think you'll be looking for every opportunity you can to purchase higher efficiency appliances and to watch every drop of water very closely. So that may be enough by having just groundwater replenishment online. That may be enough water to buy some time with the state board, and who knows how much we're going to really need long term.
Beverly?
For Keith, I had a question about, you say currently you're only you're treating water for ag, and I appreciate the advanced water purification schematic here. My question is, how treated is the water for ag? Does it take out things like pesticides and the 8,000 feet that are acre feet that are going out to the ocean that you've treated at the ag level? Tell us what the ag level is and what's in it.
Okay, well, the ag level is basically tertiary treatment. Libby had mentioned primary treatment, which is you take out the stuff that comes in the wastewater treatment plant. The secondary level is when you actually you have a biological component that actually treat the dissolved portion, the strength of the waste. And then the tertiary level is basically you settle out all the particles, and then to the point where if there's any viruses or anything like that, they're usually attached to the particles themselves. So basically by filtering that out and having a high level of disinfection, that's water that's good enough for ag. Now, one of the things we're learning more about is that all of us have probably some type of prescription drugs we might take. Different ones of those, as much as 80 or 90% of the drug actually passes through the human body into the wastewater. Now, that wasn't something that was around, 75, 100 years ago. So consequently, when we provide the water for ag, the actual plant itself acts somewhat as a filter. It goes, if they use drip irrigation, it's going into the ground. So some of those compounds are removed, and we haven't seen the evidence they actually show up in the produce you're buying. But one of the concerns is, like you said, we've got 8,000 acre feet. They're going out to the ocean. That water contains basically low levels of, very low levels. It's not anything that's dangerous that we know about in the short term, but long term, is it something that we want to do? Do we think it's good for our oceans to be having low levels of heart medication and just everything you can think of? And I would say, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So one of the things we're doing with groundwater replenishment, we have the ability to take those prescription drugs out as part of the reverse osmosis process, but we're also going to treat that waste stream to actually end up so we have a net reduction of those compounds going out to the ocean, which I think it's going to be 20 years from now. I think that's going to be the trend, that we can't have those kind of compounds in the overall ocean system or any system at all. But I think that's a great point.
What about the pesticides?
The pesticides
is highly polluted with agricultural runoff. How much of that is being removed before the stuff goes? Well,
with our tertiary water, we have a limited amount of reduction, but the water we get in that's going into the ag project is basically urban. And basically, there's going to be low levels of, basically if you're spraying for bugs and things like that, or certain types of runoff, you'll have low levels of those. But there's some limited treatment within our treatment system, but it's not 100%. It may be to the point sometime in the future it's required to go to the advanced treated portion, where, as I mentioned, the tertiary treatment goes for ag, and basically you might think that the fifth level of treatment is going into groundwater replenishment. There may be a point where we determine maybe you need to go all the way to the fifth level even for ag. We just don't know enough at this time, and again, it's been done for a long time, and we haven't seen the impacts, but we all know that things that now, 30, 50 years from now, you find out things are a little different. So we'll be prepared to do that, and that's another advantage of having a facility like this. And one of the things we propose to do for ag, because they have a problem with salt levels, we propose to give them some of the, as part of our dealing with them, is kind of trade some water with them, give them some of the advanced treated water, which will reduce some of the concentrations of salts they have in there. Plus, it'll be a higher quality of water. So I think that's very perceptive. Down the road, I think things are going to be even tighter than what they are right now.
Two more questions.
I'd just like to know what happens to all this stuff that you take out of the water. Where are we putting that?
Well, most of what we'll take out is basically salt, the minerals, and that's okay. But it's all, again, it's all the various compounds, what they call EDCs, which includes the pesticides, the prescription drugs, and everything like that. And that goes out with the brine. but we're proposing to actually treat that, and we think we'll probably use an ozone treatment, and so actually reduce the amount that goes out to the ocean. That's not required right now because it's going out there now, but we think we ought to send, we were the first in the country and actually the world that did large-scale agricultural irrigation with food crop irrigation. We showed that that was safe, and I think it's up to us to be looking, beyond in the future to be able to look at that too.
I think that we are running out of time, and we will all be here afterwards if you want to ask us questions. And I want to thank the panel very much for
I'm Brenda Lewis. I'm the Division 1 Director of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. Last year we didn't get any money from CalAM for the public to use in buying water-saving devices. We did get our money in finally in January, so I want you to please spread the word that money is available for new water-saving devices in your home. The biggest one is that we are giving you a $500 rebate on a new water-saving washing machine. So you can pretty much get the machine for just about free. So please, pass the word. We want you to use this money.